10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
For thousands of years, the Mayan created a brilliant civilization. While the Roman Empire crumbled, the Mayan was reaching its peak. Europe languished in the Dark Ages, but the Mayan were building massive stone pyramids and carved beautiful sculptures for their gods.
The Maya is probably the most advanced civilization of the Americas. At least in my perspective, they are the most sophisticated in many aspects, not just in social form, organization, but their development in science, in writing, astronomy. Definitely, they were very sophisticated people for their time period. And Copan was one of the main centers of the ancient Maya civilization. And in many ways, it was the most beautiful one, especially because of the development of its art and architecture. And of all the art forms, it was really the sculpture that made Copan particularly special.
About 200 to 900 AD, the Maya civilization boasted hundreds of cities across North and Central America. They spread throughout a diverse land known today as Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, and Honduras. The Maya recorded their history and discoveries using hieroglyphics, a form of picture writing on stone, ceramics, and paper. Each Mayan city has their own structures with ceremonial centers where the rulers practiced a complex religion based on a host of gods, a unique calendar, and ceremonies that featured a ball game and sacrifices. Who are these Mayas? How did they build these incredible cities? Did they predict the end of the world? The answers lie in the place that best exemplifies Maya art, architecture, and culture. Honduras Copan, the Athens of the Mayas. Copan is in western Honduras, in the Copan department, near to the Guatemalan border. Archaeologists believe that by 200 AD, there already was a prosperous tribal settlement in the valley of the Copan River, in the place where the ruins are today. The Copan Valley is 12.5 kilometers from east to west and 2.4 kilometers from north to south. Copan covers over 50 acres of temples, altars, stelae, ball courts, several plazas, and a magnificent Hieroglyphic Stairway. It is believed that the originator of the Mayan dynasty established his rule approximately in 426 AD. He was called Kinik Yax Kukmo, which in the Maya language meant green Quetzal macaw or shining Quetzal macaw.
Well, from what we can tell, he's buried directly underneath Temple 16 at a much lower level. He seems to come from the area of the Petén, a very successful warrior, somebody who had proven himself in the battlefield. And I think he's sent to Copan on a mission. I think he comes to establish the city and annex important resources. I think one of the primary resources he was controlling here was jade, and the jade mines that are located in the Motagua River Valley.
Copan is a name by which the site has been known since 1576. We don't know the site's original name at all, but new advances in Maya epigraphy have led to a possible reading of the Copan emblem glyph. It may be read as corner, summit, or motmot, possibly referring to Copan's position as the easternmost borders of the Maya world. However, the emblem glyph is represented by a bat or sots in Mayan.
The city was abandoned at about 850 AD. It's when it really enters in a very serious decline. But we have archaeological remains that go into the 1200 AD, and then other kinds of offerings that are still made at the site after that.
The ruins of the Copan are one of the most important sites of the Mayan civilization. This is the site of a major Maya kingdom of the classic era, 5th to 9th centuries. With beautifully carved monuments and temple pyramids rising from the jungle and representative today of what Athens is to the Old World, the cradle of its civilization. Because of this and other reasons, UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 1980. The majority of archaeologists agree that Copan formed part of the 3 largest and most lavish cultural centers of the New World. The other 2 are Tikal and Palenque. The rulers of Copan were able to sustain their political and military power for 650 years, with a dynasty of 16 kings overseeing the city's expansion. Gradually, Copan gained more military and political importance within the Maya world. The city prospered and its population grew. There was the construction of greater and more ambitious ceremonial buildings, and the commissioning of lavish works of art as in other cities in the Maya world. New temples were built on top of older ones, with each iteration being larger and taller than the previous one. Historians believed great cities like Copan were ceremonial centers where the priests lived, while the rest of the population dwelt in distant villages, visiting the plazas only to watch important rites. Elaborate hieroglyphic texts were thought to be astronomical predictions and human figurines depicting Maya gods. It is now known that these writings refer to local historical events and principally the lives and achievements of kings who are portrayed through carvings on stelae. Most of the temples and structures which we can see in this site date from the 8th century. The final ruler of Copan, Yu Sit Tok, came to power in AD 822. About this time, the kingdom began to diminish. A symbol of this tragic downfall is Altar El, which in AD 822 the king commissioned a monument to represent his time in power. However, it was never completed. Yet, despite its importance, Copan went into decline. Across the vast territory of the ancient Maya, other important sites were sharing a similar fate. Classic Maya civilization was collapsing. All evidence suggests that the Maya simply abandoned Copan. By 900 AD, only a tenth of the population was still present in the valley. Over the following centuries, the jungle remained the land that it had once given to the Maya for them to build their great city.
It was a very sophisticated culture. There were, the whole ability to develop high civilization that was organized around the ability to produce large amounts of foodstuff sufficient to sustain large populations. So their agriculture was very advanced and produced enough sustenance to allow cities as large as Copan to exist. Copan had a population of 25 to 30,000 people in the 8th century. So it was a large, thriving metropolis with extensive exchange networks going all the way to Mexico and into central Honduras also. We find objects that reflect trade from the Atlantic as well as the Pacific Ocean. So large networks of exchange and trade, which produced, I think, enough wealth to permit the development of a sophisticated rulership like they had.
600 years later, amongst the first Europeans to set eyes upon what today is known as Honduras was none other than Christopher Columbus. At this point in the voyage, Columbus was looking for a strait that would allow him access to what he believed would be the Indian Ocean. As part of their fourth voyage to the New World, Columbus's fleet landed in the island of Guanaja, today part of the Honduran Bay Islands, in July 1502. 70 years later, in 1576, The Spanish surveyor Diego Garcia del Palacio wrote a haunting description of the remains of the Mayan city in a report to the King of Spain, Felipe II. However, no effort to explore or study the ruins was made. For centuries, the Maya created thousands of books made of bark and covered with hieroglyphs. They are the key to understand the Maya writing.
One of the big highlights of Maya civilization was their ability to write. They had a completely, fully developed writing system, which allows us to know more about them than many other civilizations in the entire American continent. The Incas were enormously sophisticated, but we know very little of them because we don't have any of their writings. The same, the Aztecs, we have a lot of documentation because of the presence of the Spanish too, and because we do have some of their books. But the Maya books, yes, were burned by the Spanish during the conquest period. It's very clearly documented how it happened because they were thought to contain the works of the devil, and therefore they were burned.
Fortunately, the Maya wrote on other surfaces that couldn't be burned. Today, 4 of the Maya books or codices escaped from that time. One of those books leads to the first major breakthrough in deciphering Maya writing and understanding the Maya's reverence for time. On November 17, 1839, in the jungles of Honduras, 2 explorers, American John Lloyd Stevens and Englishman Frederick Catherwood, in a small expedition to Central America, made an incredible discovery. They found the ancient Maya city of Copan, draped with thousands of years of tropical growth. They cleared the vegetation to reveal enormous pyramidal structures, some deeply etched with mysterious designs carved on sculptures. They illustrated the exotic world of Copan by Catherwood. He was able to bring Copan back to life through his painting of temples and monuments, as they lay partially trapped by the jungle. Their best-selling book, Incidents of Travel in Central America, captivates the public attention with stories of a lost civilization.
And it was published in the 1850s, at which time, really, it caught the attention of both the audience in the United States and in Europe.
They explored from Mexico to Honduras. They were able to discover 44 Maya cities, remains of a culture that flourished for more than 700 years, from roughly 200 to 900 of the Common Era.
And after that came the first archaeological excavations, beginning in the 1890s and continuing on to the beginnings of the 1900s. From then on, work at Copan has been relatively continuous through time of different groups and expeditions.
If we put it in our cultural terms, Tikal was like New York and Copan was like Paris. The effort was continued by the Instituto Hondureño de Antropología e Historia, Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History, a project involving American and Honduran archaeologists named Proyecto Arqueológico Copan was started in 1977 and carries on to this day. The Mayans created their own system, a numerical system using a dot to represent 1 and a bar to represent 5 is the basic ingredient of the Maya's bigesimal numerical system. The Maya independently developed the concept and understood the value of the number 0 as early as 374 AD, many centuries before the Europeans did. 0 was represented by the shell glyph. In this sense, 10 was represented by 2 bars stacked on top of each other, and 12 as these 2 bars plus 2 dots at the top. However, the Maya numbers could also be represented in a glyph form, resulting in sophisticated and full-figured face-type glyphs or representations for every number found in some of the stelae at Copan. As many ancients studied the sky as an admiration to the gods and beliefs, Maya astronomers carefully observed the positions of the planets and stars. Based on the Earth's orbit around the Sun, They learned that a year was 365 days long. The Maya invented a system of math based on the number 20. Using this system, Maya astronomers designed a calendar that divided the year into 18 months of 20 days each. To these 360 days, the Maya added 5 unlucky days at the end of the year. The Maya calendar was complicated and could only be read by people with special training. But for many centuries, the Maya calendar was the most accurate calendar in the world.
The astronomy part was really the accumulation of generations upon generations of observation, naked eye observation by the ancient Maya that allowed them to be able to predict most or many of the most significant stellar movements and movements of the celestial bodies. And yes, they were able to predict major astronomical events such as eclipses with quite a bit of precision. They had almanacs, they had written books that I guess were accumulated after generations of observations. They were excellent mathematicians, and they were able to predict very clearly when these events would repeat just by observing and watching them in a very systematic fashion.
Many of these pyramids conceal something even more amazing. Beyond their sheer beauty and size, they are astronomically aligned to the Sun and Venus. And the strange markings that cover the buildings are more than decorative. They are evidence of Maya picture writing, the most comprehensive ancient script of the Americas, and one of only 5 original writing systems in the world. Their knowledge of the number system helped early scholars discover that the Maya books were celestial almanacs. The Maya could chart the 365-day solar cycle, predict solar and lunar eclipses, and even track the complex orbit of Venus. The stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, and any object that moved around in the sky were the ancestors of Maya. They were the gods of the Maya, and the Maya needed to follow them with great accuracy to know what to do here on Earth. And one object in particular, Venus, became their patron god of war. They wrote about it in their codices. They inscribed it in their stela of Copan. They used it to time their rituals, their sacrifices, their precise times when they would conduct war. This incredible astronomical ability and the apparent lack of any fortifications around Maya cities led early scholars to see the Maya as not only the most advanced civilization of the Americas, but also a peaceful people compared to other ones. A new finding changed many people's minds when a discovery in Bonampak, a ruined Maya palace in the jungles of southern Mexico, unveiled a series of startling murals depicting torture, warfare, and bloodshed. Yet it took another 40 years for scholars to accept that the Maya, for all their heavenly concerns, practiced the early tradition of warfare, torture, and human sacrifice. But not all the Mayan believed in human sacrifices.
There are different kinds of sacrifices, and there are different perspectives on them, and their significance within Maya civilization. I can't say we have a universal agreement as to how often they were and how big they were. You can go all the way to seeing things like Mel Gibson did in his movie, which basically makes them look like bloodthirsty savages, to all the way other views that basically hold that most of the sacrifice we're seeing was really self-sacrifice, was drawing some of your own blood rather than somebody else's, and offering it to the gods. You know, it's really hard to quantify how much human sacrifice is going on versus how much self-sacrifice and ritual bloodletting that was not, that did not lead to the death of the individual. And so you can, you have different extremes of view on this.
The Maya made sacrifices to the gods. They might sacrifice the life of a dog, jaguar, turkey, or other small animal. Sometimes for a very important ceremony, the Maya sacrificed a person, a prisoner of war. The victim was often painted blue and then sacrificed by a priest on top of a pyramid. Some Mayans believed in using people for their sacrifices, especially in the northern Mayan cities.
And in the scale of things, of sacrifices, we can go all the way, for example, to a little blood sacrifice when you're planting your milpa that might have been done by the field worker himself. And that was obviously something that took place on a yearly basis. It meant that you were trying to ensure the fertility of the soil and the good production of your crops. I mean, they weren't doing this just for the hell of it. I mean, there was a purpose to it. And the purpose had to do with the continuation of the cycles of life. And so you had simple sacrifices like that, or it could have been, as we see many places in the Maya world today, the sacrifices of animals and animal blood and blood scattering in the fields, all the way to, for example, the ritual sacrifice done by a king, his own bloodletting, which is very often portrayed in Maya art, where the king himself provides the blood and sacrifices some of his own blood. In other instances too, of course, we have, like the case of the 13th ruler of Copan, the death and sacrificing of a king himself in the hands of another king. In this case, the king of Quirigua, the neighboring city, to Copan, who captures the king of Copan and decapitates him. And evidently, the rites that were associated with that lasted many, many days. And it was, this was probably one of the biggest feasts and events that could be carried out by these people. So there was really a whole range of different kinds of sacrifices within Maya society. And like I say, whether we want to see them as bloodthirsty savages or people that were so bent in their religious tradition and their belief system that they were sure that this was something that was necessary for life to go on. And that really are options that is up to each one of us how we interpret it.
The Maya worshipped many different gods. Among the most important gods were Itzamna, the sky god, and Yumcax, the maize god. The Maya held many religious ceremonies in their centers.
We know quite a bit about their belief systems at the time of the Spanish conquest because the Spanish priests primarily annotated, took down and wrote about the Maya gods. But you have to remember, as you go back in time, the information becomes more diffuse, harder to focus and understand it. So we extrapolate a lot of things from the contact time period to going back to the classic period. And so it is a subject matter that is very much under discussion and that we are really learning about a lot more as time goes by, and we get more and more information from archaeological investigations about the view of the universe that the Maya had. There were, I think, among the principal deities, I think for fairly obvious reasons, were the corn god. It was the essence of sustenance for them, and also the rain god, especially in this valley, beautiful valley of Copan. When you see some of those storms move in, the thunder and lightning and the rains come down, it's very obvious why this would be such an important deity. The sun is another tremendously important deity, also for very obvious reasons. The sun controls our life entirely. The difference between night and day and even dividing up the seasons. So there are a large number of deities. The moon goddess is another very important one. Most of them, I guess, we would relate to natural phenomenon.
Copan takes first place among Maya city-states in terms of their enormous scientific effort to uncover the long-buried secrets of this civilization. The Copan Project, collaboration between the Honduran Institute of Archaeology and History and scholars of diverse institutions and nationalities, is now in its third phase since its beginning in 1978.
These are major public works directed by the king and the upper echelons of the Maya state that would allow the construction, the design, the building of these important sites. They were very important symbolically too. They represented a sacred landscape for the ancient Maya. So it was a very important part of their religious belief system. We have to remember, of course, that there was no division between the state and the church in ancient Maya society. They were both embodied by the king.
The Acropolis. The Maya kings of Copan were not interested in moving mountains. They preferred to create their own. The Mayas took their time to create their ceremonial centers, which keep well today. Their keen attention to detail is evident as you admire their painted murals and the beauty of their work in jade, ceramic, and stone, like the pyramid known as Temple 16. Rising 100 feet above the city's great plaza, it is the highest point among a group of holy buildings that archaeologists have dubbed the Acropolis.
Probably the most outstanding feature of Copan is its sculpture. And I think it had to do with a number of elements. A principal among them is the fact that we had the raw materials, that we had this volcanic tuff, which is fairly easy to quarry and fairly easy to carve. But then the other tremendous element, which I think is equally as important, is the human talent. And that is the fact of the matter is that the artisans, the artists that we had at Copan were really very, very talented human beings. And so the combination of having the raw materials and having the human talent to develop this very sophisticated style of sculpture is really something that gave Copan its very special flavor and made it, or makes it, outstanding within all of the other, 50 or 60 other major Maya sites they get in the entire Maya area. I really feel confident in saying that no other site has such outstanding beauty in carved stone as Copan does. And that's why we have built our sculpture museum here in Copan in honor of this outstanding talent of the Maya. There are obviously many other areas in which such a talent would have been projected, for example, wood carving, things like that. But those organic materials disappear. And maybe, maybe Tikal and Palenque had equally beautiful sculpture carved in wood, but it's disappeared. And then the place who had, I guess, the best stone to work with was Copan.
The Acropolis was the royal complex at the heart of Copan, divided in two large plazas, the West Court and the East Court. The West Court houses Temple 11 and Temple 16 with altar Q set at its base. Temple 11 was built as a portal to the other world. Temple 16 sits in between the East and the West Court. It was built on top of a previous temple without damaging it. Altar Q depicts the 16 members of the Copan dynasty. This large square block of carved stone portrays 16 seated men, 4 on each side. These figures represent the members of a dynastic lineage of 16 kings, whose rule spanned nearly 4 centuries before AD 426 to approximately 820 AD, during the Classic period. When archaeologists were able to actually decipher Maya hieroglyphs, these anonymous characters were suddenly transformed into real people. David Stewart discovered his name hidden in plain sight, Kinnick Yakuk Mo, and that's the name of the founder of Copan. They finally had the name of the first king, the first figure, the one who anoints the 16th king with the baton of office, sits on the glyph that represents the Maya word Lord. The dynasty came to an end with the end of Yash Pak, first Don, who built Altar Q. Its importance lies in that not only is it one of the most elaborate examples of Maya artwork found on the site, but also in that it is a historical document that depicts all 16 known kings of Copan in carved stone. It was used for sacrifices during special ceremonies by the high priest of Copan. There's an idea of a beginning and an end, as if anything that comes after the 16th ruler is somehow out of order or would begin some sort of new history, some new sense of a new beginning. Copan is perhaps best known for producing a remarkable series of portrait stelae, most of which were placed along processional ways in the central plaza of the city and the adjoining Acropolis. The detail and sheer volume of carvings in stela are impressive. 4,509 structures have been detected, with 3,450 of these structures found only 24 square kilometers surrounding the principal group. The stelae are 3 to 5 meters tall and are carved in extremely intricate high relief. On one side, the figure is carved, and on the other, a series of hieroglyphs that describe the power and politics of the ruler depicted are carved. Archaeologists have consolidated and restored many structures at the site. The stela and sculpture decorations of the buildings of Copan are some of the very finest surviving art of ancient Mesoamerica. Impressive in detail and humbling in size, these unique sculptural monuments make Copan shine among the ruined sites of the Mayan Empire and are invaluable to our understanding of this lost civilization.
No, there was no use of metals among the Maya of this time period. It was all basically stone technology. So you would use a harder stone to cut softer stone. And I think one of the things that oftentimes we tend to forget is that there was a different sense of time than what we have. Nowadays we're in such a hurry to get things done immediately and in nanoseconds, it's a different attitude then. They could take their time to build these buildings and to cut this stone and quarry it. It was very labor intensive. It took a lot of time to produce every one of these blocks, but that's what they were doing, and they weren't in such a rush as we are today. Plus, you have to remember that the ultimate motivation of this was spiritual and religious.
By the time of 18 Rabbit, the 13th ruler of Copan, the city reaches the height of its power. Copan has vassal cities in Quirigua, Los Higos, and Rio Amarillo. 18 Rabbit extends Copan's sacred geography far beyond the Acropolis and Great Plaza, erecting monuments deep into the valley. Along the Great Plaza of Copan, Ruler 13 dictates rows of these stelae, or as the Maya called them, big stones. The Mayan was the only pre-Hispanic people who developed a sophisticated written language. Although today their hieroglyphs seem large and bulky, their language was anything but primitive. When the Spanish conquered the Northern Mayan Empire in the 16th century, Copan was already abandoned. The Spanish came with the idea to conquer, and they forced their new subjects to convert to Christianity and speak and write in Spanish. But long before the Maya used the Roman alphabet, they had created their own rich and elegant script, featuring more than 800 hieroglyphs. Sadly, the glyphs' meaning were lost in the decades following the conquest.
In this case, Copan, because they did carve this information in stone, it didn't get burned. So it still exists today, and is one of the outstanding features of Copan is the Hieroglyphic Staircase, which is the longest written monument in the world. And it's a magnificent book basically written in the steps of this giant staircase.
Each of the 2,200 blocks that form the risers, consisting of more than 70 steps, bear the carved glyphs that record the history of the 16-ruler Copan dynasty formed by Yaxchiccucmo. Many of the steps have fallen down, and only a portion of more than 1,250 inscribed blocks of stone were found in the original order. Yet enough has been put together to know that it was commissioned by Smoke Shell to celebrate the lives of his ancestors. Carved on it was a complete royal history of Copan, giving all of the kings' names, all of the dates, and Copan history. The stairs are decorated with stone carvings that narrate the story of the 16 kings of Copan and constitute the single longest stone-carved Maya text ever to be found. It is the most famous of Copan's monuments.
So these are major public works directed by the king and the upper echelons of the Maya state that would allow the construction, the design, the building of these important sites. They were very important symbolically too. They represented a sacred landscape for the ancient Maya, so it was a very important part of their religious belief system. We have to remember, of course, that there was no division between the state and the church in ancient Maya society. They were both embodied by the king.
At this point, scholars can read more than 80% of the glyphs. The stairway is located on Temple 26, and it contains 63 steps completely carved with hieroglyphs that tell the history of the royal house of Copan. They kept records of their myths, history, discoveries, and religious beliefs. The kings of Copan built their temples one on top of the other, leaving parts of the old buildings inside the new structures. For over 20 years, archaeologist Ricardo Agurcia has tunneled into these temples, where he discovered a king's tomb. A new royal Maya tomb emerges from the tunnels beneath Copan's Acropolis. Archaeologists have dug more than 2 miles of tunnels through the Acropolis. The focus of royal power, the Acropolis, is a collection of massive pyramidal structures, beneath which lies a wealth of information about Copan. It is the site of current archaeological research and the most impressive substructure discovered here in the Rosalila temple. Rosalila is underneath structure 16. It is the temple of the early classic period. It is the most completely preserved example of the art and architecture of this period discovered to date. It was a building dedicated to Kinik Yak Kuk Mo. Ricardo Agurcia, the director of a research and sustainable tourism organization called the Copan Association, discovered Rosalila in 1989.
This is how I came across Rosalila, is excavating tunnels, gathering archaeological information about the earlier constructions. And the fascinating thing about Rosalila is that it is pretty much entirely preserved, which was totally unusual. I mean, they would tear these buildings down completely before they built another one on top. The case of Rosalila then is a unique example. It is also our complete text, our handbook of the art and architecture of Copan, because the last buildings that existed that were left here after the city is abandoned were destroyed by nature.
Finding Rosalila revolutionized what was known of the city's early history and the Maya southern frontier. Rosalila sits in the middle of a long sequence of constructions built over 400 years by the ancient Maya. It is built in the year 571 AD by Mun Jaguar, the 10th ruler of Copan. Unlike all other buildings in the central axis of the Copan Acropolis, it is dedicated to the memory of the founder of the dynasty, Kinik Yak Kuk Mo. But unlike all other buildings in this long sequence of constructions, Rosalila is the only one that's completely and entirely preserved. It is in fact embalmed by the ancient Maya and reflects the art and architecture, as well as the religious thought of the ancient Maya like no other building does. The Sun King's face adorns the first floor of Rosalila, a temple that was once painted a brilliant, bloody shade of red. His image wears a headdress of red, yellow, and green plumage, the feathers of a quetzal and a macaw. Curving lines in his eyes associate him with the depictions of the sun god. The Maya words for each of these sculptural elements spell his name, Kinik Yak Kuk Mo, which translates as sun-eyed, resplendent quetzal macaw, the first king of Copan. Another interesting feature of the Copan site is known as the ball court, 2 stone buildings, similar to the elongated pyramids, aligned parallel to each other to flank a rectangular area on the ground between them, where Maya warriors played a sacred and fierce ball game filled with religious symbolism. There are other buildings nearby from which the people of the city would watch the game. The ball court is the second largest to be found in Central America. The game was played on 2 levels, with the mythological Maya underworld, and here on Copan's ball court. The sacred ball game was played on long courts in their city centers. The game involved 2 teams of players and a solid rubber ball. Players tried to hit the ball through a stone ring with their hips. They were not allowed to touch the ball with their hands or feet. The game was fast and dangerous. Players wore special padded clothing to protect them. The ball game was not just a sport, it was also a sacred religious event. On certain occasions, the players who lost the game would be sacrificed to the gods. Why did this great civilization fall? The history of humankind has been marked by patterns of growth and decline. Some declines have been gradual, occurring over centuries. Others have been rapid, occurring over the course of a few years. War, drought, natural disaster, disease, and overpopulation, economic disruption, any of these or a combination of these events can bring about the collapse of a civilization. In about 900 AD, the Maya abandoned the cities of Palenque, Tikal, and Copan. No one knows why the Maya left these great cities. In spite of its wealth, power, and size, Copan collapsed. No monuments seem to have been produced after AD 822.
The truth of the matter is that the more we study the Maya, the more we realize they were just human beings, like we see all over the world. And they did things that are as horrible as things we do today, and then they did some magnificent things also. They were human.
Apparently, the world is going to end on December 21st, 2012. We've all heard these doomsday predictions before. We're still here, and the planet is still here. Why is 2012 so important? Well, the Mayan calendar stops at the end of the year 2012, churning up all sorts of religious, scientific, astrological, and historic reasons why this calendar foretells the end of life as we know it. So what is the Mayan calendar? The calendar was constructed around 250 to 900 AD. The people living in the Mayan society exhibited very advanced written skills and had an amazing ability when constructing cities and urban planning as mentioned before. But as the Maya used the numbers of 13 and 20 at the root of their numerical systems, the last day could occur on 13.0.0.0.0. When does this happen? Well, 13.0.0.0.0 represents 5,126 years, and the long count started on 0.0.0.0.0.0, which corresponds to the modern date of August 11th, 3114 BC. The Mayan long count ends 5,126 years later on December 21st, 2012. When something ends, people seem to come up with extreme theories regarding the end of civilization. A brief scan of the internet will give numerous examples of ways in which we will be wiped off the face of the Earth. Some of the most popular space-based threats to the Earth and mankind focus on Planet X wiping most life off the planet, meteorite impacts, black holes, killer solar flares, gamma-ray bursts from the star systems, a rapid ice age, and a polar magnetic shift. The Earth will be knocked off its axis. There is so much evidence against these things happening in 2012.
Many times I think that the big emphasis on 2012 is just a marketing ploy. When I see and think about the Maya, I don't see them as fatalists. I don't see them as people as thinking, that the world's going to end. I think we tend to be more that way. I think the Maya saw life in cycles and repeating cycles. I think they did understand and see death, but they saw rebirth immediately thereafter. And to me, that is the meaning of 2012.
The people living near the Mayan ruins in Copan, Honduras say, it's a rebirth, and it's a time for celebration. Let's enjoy life, and let's take care of each other.
It is the end of a very large calendar cycle. It's a huge thousands of year time period that's coming to an end. But I don't think that they thought that was going to be the end. I think, if it was an end of some kind, if it was a death of some kind, it's also a rebirth. So the very first day of the next year after 2012 is the time of rebirth. And I think maybe we should emphasize more rebirth, growth, rather than death and destruction.